Welcome to Jules Math Tools, where math is made easy. In today's session, we will be demonstrating 3 ways to calculate the percent out of a number. In our first example, we're going to be demonstrating how to calculate 22 out of 40 as a percentage by multiplying first, which means that I'm going to be taking my fraction 22/40th and multiplying this to our 100%. And remember that a percentage is always out of 100, so whenever you are converting a fraction, a decimal, or even degrees into percentage, we will always be multiplying to 100%. Now that we have set up our fraction, we're now going to be multiplying our 22 times 100. And 22 times 100 will equal to 2200. And we're going to keep our denominator of 40. And now that we have set up our fraction, we're now going to perform our long division. And I'm going to be dividing my 40 into my 2200. So 40 can't divide into 2 since 2 is less than 40. 40 can't divide into 22 again because 22 is less than 40. So we're going to be dividing 40 into 220, which will go 5 times. 5 times 40 is 200. 220 subtract 200 gives us a difference of 20. We're going to bring down our 0. And 40 goes into 200 5 times. 5 times 40 is 200. And 200 subtract 200 is 0. So we found that when we calculate 22 out of 40 as a percentage, it is equal to 55%. So this is our first method on multiplying first. And in our second method, we're going to be performing our division first, which means that I'm going to be dividing my 40 into my 22. And unlike my first division where we were dividing 40 into 2200, in this case our dividend 22 is smaller than our divisor, which means that we are going to be moving into our decimal numbers. So 40 can't divide into 22 because 22 is less than 40. So we're now going to adding our decimal point. I'm going to add a 0 and divide 40 into 220, which will divide 5 times. 5 times 40 is 200. 220 subtracts 20. 220 subtract 200 gives us 20. We're going to add another 0, bring down that 0, changing 20 into 200, and 40 divides into 200 5 times. 5 times 40 is 200, and 200 subtract 200 gives us 0. So now that we have our fraction as a decimal of 0.55, we're going to be multiplying that decimal number to our 100%. And now we'll be multiplying 0.55 times our 100%. Anything times 0 is going to be 0, so that means that 5 times 0 is 0, 5 times 0 is 0, 0 times 0 will be 0. We're going to add in our first 0, and again our multiplication will repeat itself because we are multiplying by the same number. So I'm going to be adding 2 zeros now and begin multiplying by my 1. So 1 times 5 will be 5, 1 times 5 is 5, and 1 times 0 will give us 0. Let's sum our numbers together. So we get 0 for our first column, 0 for the second column. 5 plus 0 is 5, 5 plus 0 is 5, and we're going to bring down our 0. And remember that when multiplying with decimal numbers, we always go back to the numbers we multiply and count how many digits were behind the decimal point. So in my first number, I have 2 digits behind the decimal point. And my second number, there are no digits behind the decimal point. So in total, I should have 2 digits behind the decimal point in my answer. So I'm going to count 1, 2, and input my decimal point, which will leave us with 55%. Okay, so this is our second method that we use to change our fraction or to calculate 22 out of 40 as a percentage. And we are now going to go to our final method, which is by simplifying. So when simplifying, I'm going to take my fraction 22/40 And remember that this is again being multiplied to my 100%. And now I'm going to begin reducing that fraction. So I'm going to divide my 22 by 2. My 40 is divided by 2. And 22 divided by 2 equals to 11. 40 divided by 2 will give us 20. And remember that this is still being multiplied to 100%. And now I'm going to reduce my 20 and 100% by dividing both numbers by 20. So our 11 will return. Our 20 divided by 20 will equal to 1. And 100 divided by 20 is equal to 5%. And when I multiply 11 times 5%, this will give me 5%, 55%. Our 1 we can put back, or if you know the rules when it comes to our whole numbers or our numbers, when our fractions, when we have denominator of 1, then you could skip that step and just go straight to our answer, which is 55%. Okay, so we just demonstrated 3 methods in which we can use to calculate a fraction as a percentage. We first multiplied in our first example, then we performed that division in our second example, and for our third and final example, we simplified our fractions and then performed whatever multiplication we had to do afterwards. So remember that you can use any one of these methods that you are most comfortable with, but the most important step is always to practice. So remember that we do provide you with links in the description box below, which you can click on, practice the worksheet, and then check your answers to see if the answer that you got is correct. But until next time, just remember that this is Jules Math Tools, where math is made easy.